It's very likely as a content creator that you're going to shoot some video at night or at least in a low light environment. Shooting at night has different rules to shooting during the day, and making sure your settings are dialed in correctly can be the difference between having a great shot or a bad and noisy shot. In this video, I'll be going through my settings for Lumix cameras to capture amazing shots in low light situations.
Usually when you're thinking about f-stop, you're thinking about what kind of look you want your shot to have. But where it actually matters even more is with the amount of light that lenses can let in depending on how low they can go with their f-stop. Now, the first thing I think about when it comes to filming in low light is the lenses that I'm going to use. Being realistic, something like a 3.5 and above can make filming in low light conditions quite tricky, simply because the lower your f-stop is, the more your aperture is open, which means more light is let in. Whereas vice versa, the higher your f-stop is, the more your aperture is closed down, less light comes in and hits your sensor. Now, the two lenses I'm rocking are the 50mm by Lumix, the f1.8 version, and on my S9 right now I have the 18mm, also the f1.8 from Lumix. But anything around f2.8 and below, you should be good when it comes to filming at night. You can immediately see why this is beneficial. And just to show it to you guys rather than just talking about it, here are some example shots I captured around the city using the Lumix 50mm f1.8. Now let's actually stop the lens down to an f4 so that you can actually see the difference it makes in terms of exposure. Now I respect that not everybody may be in the position to be able to afford a fast lens. By that I mean a lens that can go down to f2.8, 1.8, 1.4, 1.2, whatever. And perhaps all you have to use is your kit lens that came with the camera. Now, kit lenses aren't too bad. You can get some that go down to an f3.5 like the Lumix 20-60 does. There are still plenty of ways to make a lens like that work. And I'm gonna go through that later on in the video, so keep watching.
Placement. Where you put your camera matters a lot. Not just for framing and all of that jazz, but where in the environment you're placing your camera, that's what I mean specifically. For instance, if you put your camera in a dark alley where there is literally no light, no matter what, you're not going to be able to see anything on the screen. And I also would have to question, why are you filming in the middle of an alley where there's no light? What are you up to? What are you doing? You do need to shoot somewhere with some light available. After all, it is called low light filmmaking, not no light filmmaking. If you don't live near a city, it will be a bit trickier, but these tips will still apply, and it's definitely still possible to capture great looking shots. And I know it sounds a little bit silly, like we're meant to be talking about getting shots in a low light area, but the reality is you do need some amount of light to be able to get any kinds of shots at all. And really what we're exploring in this video is getting the best shots possible in the situation that you're in. Maybe it will be a bit dark, maybe there will be some noise that you need to take care of later on in post, or that you just roll with, but regardless, if there's no light, you will not see a thing. So when I am shooting out at night or in the evening or whatever, I always look for areas that have some light available. Street lamps are an obvious choice, or parks, malls. The fun thing is that each of these places provide a different look, and some parks might be darker than like the streets or the malls and stuff, so obviously you can have a play and pick and choose what sort of environment you want to shoot in. You can see here how dark the park is compared to like the streets and stuff and the malls, but there are still street lamps in the park here, so it's definitely possible to shoot in the park. It's just you have to change up your settings a little bit. For instance, here I'm actually shooting at ISO 640 because there is that much light on the city streets here in Bangkok. But in the park, I did have to switch to ISO 4000 just because there's a little bit less light available. Not none, and even if I was close enough to a light source, I was able to bring it down again. But because the light is more spread out in a park, you have to bear that in mind compared to shooting in the street. With that said, parks can give you an interesting mixture of light, which means you can get some interesting shots as well. Malls are pretty interesting too because typically the lighting on the outside of a mall is both decorative and utilitarian, which means I can just get really interesting bokeh, or I can get different colored light on subjects that are going by and things like that. And that just means I can capture some really interesting looking shots. I personally like to use the mall's lights for interesting bokeh, just having different colored bokeh balls and in the background rather than just being like white or yellow. It just visual interest and all that. Scene 3, slow down. Believe it or not, I don't shoot slow motion at night. Now, this may have come with an asterisk, so I'm gonna immediately contradict myself. I might, if there's enough light available, but it's a huge if. And the problem when shooting slow motion is that your shutter speed or shutter angle, it doubles. So you let in less light, and in an already dark environment, that is just annoying. It's a hindrance you don't want to have to deal with when you're already struggling to get enough light into your sensor. Now, like I said, where I contradict myself, if there's enough light, go for it. On the city streets, around the malls and stuff, when they're lit up brightly, perhaps in an environment where, because you're shooting at ISO 640, you could switch to slow motion and just bump up the ISO to 4000. And I'm referencing the Lumix S9 and S5 Mark II here. Obviously, your dual native ISOs will differ if you're using a different camera, just kind of talk about what I'm using here. And that will allow you to shoot in slow motion, so you can do it. But majority of the shots I capture at night or low light situations, I just stick with real time 25 frames per second. It will be 24 if you are in a NTSC country. I'm in a PAL country, hence we use 25. Now the funny thing is, the actual point to this point, because I'm not just telling you don't shoot slow motion and that's it, let's move on to the next point. My point with this point of slowing down is actually you can slow down your shutter speed just a touch to let in a little bit more light. And this can be way more helpful than you actually might think, because sometimes all you need is just that little bit more light to get your shadows correctly exposed and to have a noiseless image. Now, I wouldn't recommend going too crazy with this because the lower your shutter speed or the higher your shutter angle, depending on what you're using, the more blurry your image becomes. Now, depending on what you're shooting, that might work pretty well. Maybe that's the kind of effect that you want for this shot, so go for it, go nuts. But I personally just bring things down by like maybe a touch or two, and that's kind of it. When things start to get too blurry, it's very noticeable and it just doesn't look good in my opinion. But again, if you're going for that kind of look for that shot for like stylistic reasons, then go wild. Hello. Just to interrupt the video here, all the shots that you have been watching throughout this video have been colored with my newly updated Kodak and Fujifilm film emulation LUTs. That's right, all the LUTs for these classic looks have now been revamped. They look so much better, skin tones are much more balanced, the colors are much more refined and even, and there's a much less contrasty version now available with every single pack that you purchase. If you've already purchased these in the past, by the way, you should have gotten an update email, so check your inbox just in case and check the spam as well. All of these LUTs come with the conversion LUT built in. That means when you're shooting in a log picture profile, you don't have to worry about converting your log footage to Rec 709 and then coloring it with the LUT. This LUT does it for you. But let's say you don't want that, or you have a different camera to a Lumix camera, you have a Sony or a Nikon or whatever. Well, there are Rec 709 versions of these LUTs as well, which essentially is just the creative part of the LUT without the Rec 709 conversion LUT. So you can use these LUTs for any cameras at all and maintain full control and still get that cool creative look. There's a link in the description down below for mckc.video. Check out the shop and take a look around. And viewers of this video can get 20% off by using the code on screen.
Now when it comes to exposing, this has to be one of the more critical things when it comes to shooting in low light situations. And I'm aware it's daytime right now, but coffee. So when it comes to shooting in low light and exposing for low light situations, well, you can see here, I just screwed up the exposure. The highlights are gone. And what you want to make sure to do is to balance your image as much as possible. But at the same time, you need to really expose for the shadows. Now, contrary to what I'm doing now, where I'm exposing for the highlights because it's daytime and it makes more sense, and that's kind of what we're used to, right? You don't want to have blown out highlights because then things don't look correct, they don't look professional and realistic. It looks very amateur if you have exposed highlights because you've exposed for shadows. For nighttime stuff, low light stuff, you want to expose for the shadows. Mainly because, and this is especially if you're shooting in a log picture profile, you want to give your shadows a clean noise bed so that when you go to bring down the highlights and everything in post, your shadows don't just become a noisy block of like mess and whatever. They actually look clean. That's a common problem when shooting in log that a lot of people experience, and that is how you get around it. So what you really want to look for is on your camera where you have like your meter, you want to have this between +2 and +3 on Lumix systems. You have to be careful here because you don't want to like actually blow your highlights, because if you have street lamps or whatever it might be, if you blow them, they're still gone. But you got to bear in mind that a log picture profile allows you to recover details from highlights, but it's a lot harder to do from shadows when there's so little information there because it's so dark. So that is how you expose for shadows. And a great tool to help you with exposing in low light situations is by using a dual native ISO camera. A dual native ISO camera, basically the native ISO of your camera is the ISO at which your camera performs its best.
To make this a lot easier for you guys, I decided to make a Google Sheets spreadsheet that has all of the native ISOs for all of the full frame Lumix cameras that have come out in the past few years. Now, depending on which camera you have, you can see that your dual native ISOs will vary just a little bit, but the cameras I use most often are the S5 Mark II and the S9, for which the dual native ISOs are 640 and 4000. But you can see all the information here in this nice and simple table. It'll be downloadable for you guys with a link in the description just below that like button.
Having a higher native ISO, that allows me to shoot in low light situations, but at a higher ISO so I can expose for darker situations and still have a clean noise bed. And that is the critical thing here. Utilize the second one to give yourself more flexibility in low light situations. You may not always need to use it. Maybe there's enough ambient light in the city you're in, but it's good to have a second native ISO so that you can have that flexibility if needed. I remember earlier in the video, I said I would explain to you guys how you can use a higher f-stop lens in a low light situation, because one of the key things, lower f-stop means you can let in more light, blah, blah, blah. But what if you don't have like an f1.2 35mm from Sigma? What do? Well, there's still a few things you can do to make your image look crispy. First is a tip I've already said in this video. Stick to brighter areas. If you live in a city, this is probably the easiest thing for you to do. Stick to brighter areas with street lights, park lights, buildings that have a lot of lights on them, neon signs and things like that. And then pair that with a tip I said just a little bit ago, where you want to expose for your shadows as best as possible. This way, even though you're shooting like an f3.5 or an f4 or even a 5.6, you can still have a clean looking shot. Sure, it would be easier if you had a faster lens, but that's not the reality for everybody. But there's still a way to get great looking low light shots even with an f4 lens. And just to prove that to you guys, all the shots that you have been seeing have been shot at f3.5 to f4 on my 18mm and my 50mm from Lumix. Even though they can go down to f1.8, I can still get great looking shots. So it's possible regardless of the lens that you have. A bamboo straw. That's cool.
Okay, you guys are way too low. You guys have probably been wondering where the hell have the videos been. I've been sick. I got KO'd by the flu so hard. I was literally like, I spent one of the entire days in bed. Like I hate doing nothing, so like I tried to at least get onto the sofa and continue to do nothing, but I don't know what it was. It wasn't COVID, so that's good, but I don't know. Something kicked my ass, so that's why this video is late. But to round off this video, well, that's what I'm doing now. So hopefully all of these tips have helped you guys piece together how to utilize your Lumix cameras to film in low light situations. Yes, there's some things that are similar to daytime, but nighttime does play by different rules. Like in life, cameras also need different rules too. But thankfully, they're kind of simple. Fast lenses take advantage of the flexibility that a dual native ISO camera gives, which, considering the title of this video, that's basically going to be what your camera can do. All the full frame Lumix cameras have the ability, since the S5 Mark II anyway, have a dual native ISO, and utilize those little tricks I taught throughout the video to make the most out of the available light you have to create great looking shots in whatever low light scenario you find yourself in. I'm still like, I'm like 90% better, but Well, damn. And with that, don't forget to hit subscribe if you guys found the video useful. Make sure you headbutt the like button, as well as it will tell YouTube to send this video out to more people just as awesome as you. And if you guys want to learn more about the cameras I use to create my videos and the ones that I use to shoot in low light all the time, check out these two videos on screen, and I'll see you guys there.